Hello everyone, this is Miss Smith, and the purpose of this video is to discuss how to get a job. So we're at the point of the semester where we're going to be talking about our job packets assignments. But first, we want to make sure that we have gone over a lot of the information from the textbook that will help us in this process of getting a job. It doesn't matter if you're looking for a job now or if you will be looking for a job in the future. It's helpful information nonetheless. Now, we all know that as college students, that is our ultimate goal, to ideally land a job in our field of study. And so make sure that you pay careful attention to the information covered in this chapter, the information that I share in this video, which will at times be in addition to what the textbook offers. And hopefully this information coupled with your own experiences will help you be successful in your future job searches. Okay, so for this video, I am going to do something different. Usually I use a PowerPoint, but this time we're going to use the ebook version for us just to take a look at as I'm talking through different points of the chapter. I'm not going to go through everything, but I'm going to highlight just some key parts of the chapter that I want to kind of emphasize as we talk about how to get a job. Another thing to be mindful of, this video will not cover resumes and cover letters, or letters of application as the book calls it. That will be covered in a separate video. Okay, and so let's go ahead and get started. And so I want to start off with the steps to follow to get hired. The book starts off of talking about what the employer's process is, which I think is good information. But it's important that we start here, right? About the steps that you need to take to get hired. First thing you want to do is analyze your strengths and restrict your job search. That makes sense, right? You want to make sure that you are applying for a job that you are qualified for. You don't want to be overqualified and you don't want to be underqualified. You want to make sure it's a position that that meets your strengths, that meets your skill level, your training, your experience. All of that is taken into account when you select a job that you're going to apply for. It's also important that you enhance your image. We'll talk more about that. That you look in the right places for a job, assemble a dossier and a portfolio. Now we will talk about our online portfolio assignment later in the semester. So we're going to do that separate. And that's not going to be specific to getting a job. It's going to be a portfolio of the work that you've completed in this class. But it still will be a great resource for you and a marketing tool to have that online portfolio that you can continue to use to market yourself as a job seeker. Okay? Prepare a resume, write a letter of application, and fill out a job application, go on an interview, and accept or decline a job offer. So those are the steps that the book outlines, and I agree with them. Those are essentially the steps that you go through to go about being hired for a job. I will point out that a lot of times some of these steps may change. And so while some employers want you to send your resume in to express your interest in the job, a lot of times the employer will start with the application process. So you may need to fill out an application first, and then they may ask with your application that you attach a resume or a cover letter or some academic transcripts, right? So they may kind of get some of these steps out of order in terms of how the book has discussed them. So let's talk about enhancing your professional image, because that's going to be really, really important. And it's a good proactive step you can take even before you're actively job seeking, okay? Now, we're looking on page 161 in the textbook if you happen to be following along. And the book gives us some really good tips for enhancing your professional image. Essentially, what you're trying to do is you're trying to make yourself more marketable as a job seeker, somebody who will be in high demand based on your skills and your experience and your knowledge and your connections. All of those things play a role. And so you kind of want to get yourself out there and you want to find out as much as you can about your field, and you want to make sure that you are exploring all of the different avenues that are available to you for you to be become aware of some opportunities that exist. Not every job opportunity will be posted on a website somewhere. Sometimes you find opportunities just through networking with people. Okay, and so let's take a look at a couple of the things that the book mentions that you can do. Attending job fairs is a great idea. We have job fairs sometimes on campus. We have interviewing workshops on our campus. And so when you attend these different types of events, you have an opportunity typically to meet prospective employers. You have an opportunity to build good rapport with people, right? And to try to establish some initial connections with people. And so you want to make sure that you're attending things like job fairs and different career workshops we may have on campus, because those things could be really helpful for you. And of course, it goes without saying that when you attend a job fair, you want to look your best. You don't necessarily have to dress up or go over the top, but you want to be presentable, right? You don't want to wear cut off jeans or flip-flops, or you want to make sure that you remember that your audience will be an audience of prospective employers. Okay, the book also talks about joining and participating in student and professional organizations, and that's really important. You get to meet other people in your field when you participate in those professional organizations and in those student organizations, and it's invaluable if you have connections, especially in the future, that you can pull on for new opportunities. Okay, making connections is the name of the game. It's also a good idea to apply for relevant internships and training programs to gain real-world experience and to increase your networking contacts. Those internships, sometimes they're paid and sometimes they're unpaid, but the experience you get as a result of participating in an internship is invaluable. Okay, you get a lot of great experience while you're a student, and it also shows initiative on your part, that you want to be in this field so much that you are seeking ways to get that experience to kind of give you that advantage over other job seekers who will be pursuing the same types of opportunities that you will be pursuing. I'm glad that the book mentions find a mentor. That's really, really important, and we don't typically do that enough. And so if you are certain about the field that you want to be in, you've put the time and the investment into being educated in that field, it's always a great idea to find a mentor. Find someone who is doing what you want to be doing and who's doing it well, and ideally who has been doing it for a substantial amount of time, who's successful and who has longevity in that career. And ask that individual if they would be willing to be your mentor. Now you and that individual would have to establish the parameters of your mentorship relationship. But essentially what you're looking for is someone who would be willing to meet with you regularly, whether that's once a week or once a month or once a quarter, and just kind of share insights with you about the field. Someone who's willing to follow your career and offer you constructive criticism when you need it, and offer you good direction for the things that you're doing right and that you need to continue doing. That mentor is a great person to have, and it's someone whose voice, whose insight you trust. Okay, and so if it's somebody that is in your field who's doing a great job and has been doing it for a while, and you would love for that person to be your mentor, make sure that you approach that person in a professional manner and ask for that opportunity, and then make sure that you're very clear about those guidelines in terms of that relationship with you and your mentor. Okay, volunteer work is also really important. It's not paid if it's volunteer work, but the experience that you can get and the connections you can make are really, really invaluable. Okay, and so enhancing your professional image can be done in numerous ways. The book outlines several great ways, which we've just discussed, but make sure that you do that. You can do that now, even before you are actively on the job market. The book talks about looking in the right places for a job. Of course, that's very important. You want to make sure that you are exhausting all of your resources when you're looking for a job, that you're looking everywhere where an opportunity could be. And so the book talks about various job posting sites. Typically, these are free. I would be wary of any job posting site that requires you to pay money to view their listings, because so many of them are free nowadays. And so you should be able to search for job openings without having to spend any money to do that. The book also talks about great opportunities and websites specifically for veterans. So if you're a veteran, there's some resources out there specifically for you. Okay? And so let's kind of go back and let's talk now about finding jobs through networking sites. And so, of course, we have those websites that offer those job posting opportunities that we were just talking about. But nowadays, we have networking sites that also help us find jobs. And so the book talks about Facebook being an opportunity. Facebook is really good for reconnecting with people. And so if it's someone you've been out of touch with for a while and you want to reconnect with them and make the request of them to see if they would be willing to be a reference for you, or make you aware of job opportunities in your field, you can use Facebook for that, right? Just to kind of reestablish those connections within a network. But the book also talks about LinkedIn. LinkedIn is an invaluable tool for the job seeker and for the employee, right? Regardless of what field you're in. Okay. And the book actually calls it the most important social network for your job search. You can use LinkedIn to search, but you can also use LinkedIn to network, to make connections with people that you know, and also people that you may not know, but who may be in the same field that you're in, that you may want to know a little bit more about them. And more than 90 million companies, this number blew me away, more than 90 million companies and individuals belong to LinkedIn. That's a lot of people and a lot of resources that are going across the internet every day, right? A lot of connections, a lot of opportunities for networking. And so you want to make sure that you are a part of the LinkedIn network. Now, of course, if there's any place where you need to be professional, you need to be professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is not like Facebook. It's definitely not like Twitter, or it's not like Snapchat or anything else like that. LinkedIn is set up as a professional site. And so the people who are on the site are expected to be there in a professional manner. You don't want to post any image of yourself or any profile image of yourself that looks too casual, that looks unprofessional in any way, or questionable. You never want to do anything to jeopardize your credibility. You want to make sure that your language is correct, that your spelling is correct. You can very quickly diminish your credibility on a site like LinkedIn. And it's important that you connect with people. You have the opportunity to make recommendations for people, recommending people that you know who are good at specific things, recommending them in those areas, and then people have the opportunity to recommend you as well. And so the book talks more about LinkedIn, but it is definitely a great place to look for a job, a great place to network even after you've landed the job that you want. And it's a great way to connect with people in a professional type of a social networking setting. Okay? And so all of that is really important. Another thing I will say before we kind of go off of the social networking topic, be mindful of your digital footprint. It's really important. And so, especially when you're about to begin a job search, you want to make sure you go back and you take inventory of your social media sites. You want to clean up, delete, remove anything that would appear questionable for you. Whether you think it's fair or not, employers nowadays will check a job candidate's social media pages. And they may check it at the point of getting an application from someone to see if they want to interview that person, or they may check it after an interview has happened to see if they want to, or before an interview has happened, to see if they would seriously consider hiring this person. And so you don't want your social media pages to present you in any questionable light. Or if you tend to have strong views on matters, especially controversial issues, you may want to tone down some of your language. It just may be a good idea depending on the field that you're going into, especially if you're going to be required to work with people whose views may differ from yours. Your prospective employer could see your strong views as you possibly not being able to be a team player or work well with others. Okay? Again, you may disagree with that practice, but it's not going away. Employers regularly check social media pages so that they can get more insight into the candidate and who that person is before they offer a job or hire an individual. Okay, so just be mindful of your digital footprint and make sure that you're making good decisions with what you decide to post online. So let's go back now and let's talk about letters of recommendation. Okay, and like I said, I'm just kind of touching on things throughout the chapter. There's a whole lot more in this chapter. I just want to touch on a few things. And so the letters of recommendation are really important. And so if you apply for a job, sometimes the employer will ask up front for you to submit with your application and or resume 3 letters of recommendation. And these are actual letters that they want you to obtain from someone who would recommend you for the position that you're seeking. Okay, and so letters of recommendation become very important. But I just want to kind of give you some tips based on things that I myself have seen and observed and experienced that hopefully will help you in this whole process of letters of recommendation. Okay. Number one, you want to know whom to ask for a letter of recommendation. And so the book talks about this as well. Previous employers, 2 to 3 of your professors who know your work, supervisors who evaluated and praised your work in the military, community leaders or officials with whom you have worked successfully on civic projects. All of those people would be great types of people to ask for a letter of recommendation because they're going to be viewed as being objective about you. They're not family, they're not friends, they're not neighbors, they're not people who know you in any personal capacity. They know you in a professional setting. And so their recommendation would carry more weight, right? And you definitely don't want to ask a family member or a close friend for a recommendation if the job is specifically said not to. Okay, you never want to do that. And so you want to know whom to ask for the letter of recommendation. Of course, you want to ask someone who will speak well of you. The goal for you is to have someone write what the book calls an enthusiastic letter of recommendation for you. Okay, an enthusiastic letter of recommendation, someone who would recommend you without any reservations. That's your goal. And so you want to find that person who will do that. And so what does that mean now before you even start your job search? That, of course, means that you want to cultivate those relationships. You want to cultivate those relationships with your instructors. You want to cultivate those relationships at your current job, right? Or if you're volunteering somewhere where you volunteer, you want to cultivate those relationships so that when you need a letter of recommendation, there will be someone who could speak well of you and well of your work. Okay? You want to remind the individual who you are. Okay, so a lot of times when we have to ask for a letter of recommendation, there has been a period of time between when we were working at that company or when we were in that person's class or at that college, whatever the case might be. And so keep in mind that the person that you're asking the letter of recommendation from may remember your name, but they may not remember much about your work. Or vice versa, they may remember your work, but they may not remember you by name when they first see it. They may remember you full on depending on the level of interaction you've had with them or the level of relationship, professional relationship you've had with them, but you still want to remind them of who you are, okay? And you want to provide them with the necessary information to help you get that letter of recommendation. And so, for example, and I'll tell you a quick story, every semester for maybe the past 2 or 3 years, I've had students, former English 165 students, whom I've taught in previous semesters, come to me at the end of their college career and ask me to write a letter of recommendation for them, to include in a portfolio for one of the programs we have on campus. Great program, okay? And so every single time the student has, actually with maybe one exception, the students have come to me at the very last minute, so last minute that I get an email from them and they ask me for the letter of recommendation and they say something along the lines of, well, I can pick it up tomorrow. Like literally the day after they've sent me the email. And so that is not something you want to do. That will diminish your credibility and it will make you look very inconsiderate because you don't know what that person already has on his or her plate or what they have to get done. They just may not have time to write your letter of recommendation. Ideally, you want to give a 2-week window that you can ask that person, can you please create a letter of recommendation for me? I need it 2 weeks from now, right? You want to give them that ample time. That is the considerate thing to do. Allow ample time for your request, okay? And so that's really important. And you also want to make sure that you thank the person who's written a letter of recommendation for you, and that you just let them know that you appreciate that they've done that for you. It's not enough to just say thank you when you show up to pick up the letter. Send them a card, and we'll talk more about following up in just a minute. But send them a card, send them an email, and thank them again for being willing to do that. Not only will it make you look professional, it will cultivate goodwill. So the next time you need to ask them to write a letter of recommendation for you, hopefully they will be very willing to do that. Okay? And so I want to show you also in the textbook, and I may be going the wrong way here, but in the textbook, there was a great example on page 172, and I may not be looking in the right place for it, but you can look in your book on page 172. Oh, here it is. A great example of a letter of recommendation, right? A request for a letter of recommendation, okay? And this person does some of what I was telling you about, reminding the reader, or the individual, who they are, kind of talking about the skills that they learned on the job. A lot of this information is in here. So make sure that you read this letter, which is located on page 172, a good example of a request for a letter of recommendation. Now, asking for a letter of recommendation and asking for a reference, they're kind of two different things, but they kind of are in the same family of request, okay? And so the letter of recommendation, of course, is a letter that the individual that you're asking for the letter from, that person would write the letter on your behalf. The reference, usually there's not a letter of recommendation involved with the reference, but it's someone who would be willing to be contacted by the prospective employer, by the company that you are seeking a job with, and be willing to talk with maybe someone from HR or another hiring manager about you, about your qualifications, about whether they would recommend you for the position or not. Okay, somebody who's willing to be contacted will be your reference. All right, but in either case, whether it's a letter of recommendation or a reference, you want to make sure that you always ask for permission. Always, always, always ask for permission. Ask them if they would be willing to write the letter of recommendation for you. If it's a reference, make sure you ask for permission. You never want to put someone's name down as a reference and you have not told that individual. Okay, that's going to be the major way to discredit you, to lower your credibility, and that person may say something about you that is not favorable. Okay, and so that's going to be really important that you remember those things. Now let's talk about interviewing. Interviewing is really, 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 really important. Now we're going to talk about the resume in another video, like I said, but it's important to know that the purpose of the resume is to ideally help you obtain an interview. Okay, that's the main goal of the resume. The main goal of the resume is to help you obtain a job interview. Okay, so we'll come back to talking about that. But once we have the interview set up, what is it that you need to know? Okay, so first of all, it's important that you know that there are various ways that a company or prospective employer can conduct an interview. Various ways, especially in today's world where we have technology and everything at our fingertips. And so you could have an interview face to face, which is typical. You may have an interview over the phone. You may do a video conference, or via Skype you may have an interview. Okay, you may be interviewing with one person, or you may show up and realize you're interviewing with a whole room full of people. And so it's important that you are mentally prepared, especially on the day of your interview, so that you're trying to put your best foot forward at all times. Okay? So there are various ways that employers will tend to conduct interviews. You definitely want to make sure that you do your homework about the company. I cannot emphasize this enough. This is so very important. You never want to show up for a job interview without having done your homework about the company. Now, yes, you should have the job posting and the job description for the specific job that you are interested in, but you also need to have a larger understanding of the company. Go to their website, look up their mission statement, about us statement, history page, right? And so you can look up all of these different types of information to get a sense of who the employer is, what they value, what they want from their employees. You want to make sure that you understand those things, especially things like the mission statement, okay, or vision statement. Different companies will call it different things, but a lot of times it is included on the company's website. So make sure that you're aware of those things, okay? Do your homework about the company. You can also search the company's name in a Google search, or with your local newspaper, to see where they've come up in the news recently. Maybe they had a really big third quarter or something, and I'm in their their results were publicized. So let's say they had a big fundraiser and they did a lot of good in the community, and those things that were publicized, you want to make sure that you're aware of those things, those current events, those latest events for the company, because that type of information, if you're able to talk intelligently about it during the interview, it will show that you are interested in being an employee at that company. And that is what the prospective employer is looking for. They do not simply want someone who is casting a wide net, hoping to get a job somewhere in their field. For every interview that you go on, you want to make that employer or that prospective employer feel like you want to be employed there, specifically there at that company, and that you've taken the time to learn about the company. Okay, so that's really important. Of course, you want to carefully read the job description. You want to know exactly what it is you're signing up for, and hopefully you've already done that when you were compiling your job application materials and your resume and everything. But read over it again, read it very carefully, so that you know exactly what it is they're asking for from you. Okay, bring extra copies of your resume with you to the interview. It's really important that you do not use your cell phone. You want to make sure that you're practicing business etiquette. Okay, it's really, really important, even if you're sitting in the waiting room, that you're not on your cell phone. You could look distracted, you could look bored, you could look disinterested. You want to give your full attention to the task at hand, which is having a successful interview with this prospective employer. All right. Now let me just stop right here for a second and just share a couple of things that I've learned over the years, especially when it comes to the job interview. Your job interview is so very important. This is the point in time when you're no longer a name on a page, but you become a real person that the prospective employer can look at, can talk to, can communicate with verbally, and can really get a sense of who you are and how you will be as an employee. Okay? And so the job interview is so very, very, very important. Okay? It's important that you understand that on the day of your interview, you are always being interviewed. I would say from the moment you leave your house, you're being interviewed. You have to kind of think that way because you never know whose eyes are watching you, and you never know, um, you know, how people are connected. Okay, and so let's just say, for example, and this is a true story, this has happened before, you are trying to get to your interview and you're nervous and you're on the interstate and you're just kind of darting in and out of traffic. You're driving super fast because you want to get there early, and I mean, you're just zooming in and out of traffic, and maybe you've cut a person or two off along the way. Okay, and you pull into the parking lot as fast as you can, and you get in a parking spot and you get out the car, and I mean, you look amazing, you look fabulous, you look ready for this interview, and you walk up um, to the entrance doors, right? And then you go in only to realize that one of the people that you cut off in traffic is one of the people conducting your interviews. Okay, it has happened. Believe me when I tell you, it has happened. Okay? You're always being interviewed. You don't want to make any kind of a bad impression. All right? And so you want to make sure that you're mindful of that, especially on the day of your interview. It's also important, and this was really great advice that was given to me and something that I've also learned from my experience as well. Um, there is no such thing as an unimportant person. No such thing as unimportant people. And so when you are there for your interview, you need to be mindful, and be intentional to be pleasant and professional with everyone. And it doesn't matter if it's the janitor in the hall mopping the floor, right? Or if it's the receptionist behind the desk, right? Or somebody else that you might see along the way. Every single person is an important person. You never know when someone could be an influencer, right? Someone who could have great influence with somebody who you're going to interview with. And if you have a good relationship and a good rapport and just a good, you know, interaction with people, that could bode well for you, or at the very least, it couldn't hurt you. Okay? And so you're not trying to manipulate people, you're just trying to be pleasant and professional. Speak to people, say, how are you doing? Right? Be welcoming to people, and make sure that you're pleasant and you're professional and you're mannerable at all times. Okay? So all of that's really, really important. Um, and make sure, this is really, really important, that you prepare 2 to 3 questions to ask at the end of your interview. Okay? And so your prospective employer will most likely ask you at the end of your interview if you have any questions for him or her. Okay? You never ever want to say, I don't have any questions. You don't want to do that. you want to have 2 or 3 questions already prepared. And these questions need to be informed based on what you've already looked at on the website, what you know about the job, the research you've done, the homework you've done on the company. It needs to be informed questions. Okay? Have those questions prepared. Never say that you don't have any other questions. Now, let's say you have those 2 to 3 questions prepared. And during the course of the interview, the questions have already been answered. What you can do at that point, at the end of the interview, when they ask you if you have any questions, just say, well, I had a question about so and so, and I had a question about this, but you've already answered those questions for me. That will indicate that at least you had some questions prepared for them. Okay, that would be fine. But you never want to just simply say that you don't have any questions. Okay, so the book talks about some do's and some don'ts. 10 actually. Interview do's and don'ts. That's going to be really, really important for you to take a look at that list of 10 do's and don'ts. Of course, you want to be on time. We've already talked about the cell phones. You want to dress appropriately for the interview. You want to make sure that you greet the interviewer with a friendly and firm handshake, but nothing that's trying to, like you're trying to squeeze their hand or anything. You just want to make sure that it's a firm, friendly handshake. Okay. Don't sit down before the interviewer does. Wait for the interviewer to invite you to sit and indicate where you should sit. You want to speak slowly and distinctly. If you have a tendency to talk really fast or to talk really slow, you want to make sure you have a good rhythm, a good rate of speaking. Of course, you never want to chew gum or have any kind of habits like clicking on a pen, fidgeting with your hair, tapping your foot, drumming your fingernails on the table. You don't want to do any of that because those things could be distracting and or annoying to the prospective employer, especially the gum. Spit all gum out before you go in for that interview. Okay, I would say before you get to the job site, leave the gum completely out. Okay, maintain appropriate eye contact with the interviewer. That's really important. Don't avoid looking at them because it'll look like you have something to hide. So make sure you maintain an appropriate eye contact. Don't slouch. Make sure you smile. You want to be at your very best. You want to be confident. You have put in the work to get to this point of getting an interview. So let them see who you are. Right? Be confident in who you are, in your training, and your experience, and be prepared to talk about you. Okay? It's all about talking about yourself. And so be prepared for that. Okay, and also learning about the employer. Now let me kind of step back for a second. You don't want to just talk about yourself. You want to learn about the company, right? You want to get information. You want to ask questions about the company, do your homework and all of that. But the purpose of the interview is for them to learn more about you. So when I say, you're talking about yourself, you are a subject matter that you already know about. So use that as a point of confidence, right? Just make sure that you're prepared to go in and just do your very best job at convincing them, persuading them that you are the right person for the job. Okay? And of course, when the interview is over, you want to thank the interviewer. Okay. Now, the book also talks about questions that you can expect during the job interview. This is really good information, things that you can go over and look at and be prepared for with your job interview. The book talks about questions that the interviewer should not ask you. And it also gives you some possible questions you can ask the interviewer, kind of what we were talking about before. Now, the questions that the book gives are good questions, but they can be a little general. I want you to make sure, though, that you have questions that are specific to the company that you are looking for a job at, okay, specific to that company. And that will be definitely something that could add to your credibility, okay? And so let's talk really quickly about the follow-up letter. So it's important that once you've gone to an interview and once you have met the players at the company and now you have faces to put with names and they've interviewed you, it's really important that you follow up with the interviewer, okay, and with others who are in the room. So at the end of your interview, it's a good idea for you to ask for business cards that you can take with you. Okay, just one business card from each person in the room if they have them to give to you, because that way on that business card you will have your interviewer's first and last name and the correct spelling of their first and last name. You'll have the company's address, you'll have phone numbers and email addresses. Okay, so you'll have a wealth of contact information on those business cards. So ask for those cards at the end of your interview, and make sure that within a week of the interview, send a follow-up letter. Now, it's a good idea not to send an email, but to send an actual letter. And I actually prefer, even instead of a letter, to send a thank you card, a handwritten thank you card. Nobody writes anything by hand anymore. But that's really important, especially in the workplace, to have that nice personal touch. It kind of sets you apart as well. And so if your penmanship is just terrible, just write the letter, right? But if you can, pull together a nice thank you card, then definitely do that. And think ABC format with this, okay? You're not writing three thick paragraphs in a note card, but begin with something that's a generalized opening, have your details in the middle, and then a goodwill closing at the end. So for example, it was a pleasure meeting you on Thursday. I'm going to make all of the details up here, September 15th, for my job interview for the office manager position. Okay? That next sentence, when we discussed, blah, 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 and so, it gave me great insight into the company, and I'm even more excited about the opportunity to work for this amazing company. I look forward to hearing from you, and look forward to your decision. Thank you again for your time. Sincerely, your name. And so just that that card, that note card, that follow-up letter, all of that information is in the book, but it's definitely going to be a good idea to follow up. It kind of sets you apart. Okay, and that's exactly what you want to do. So finally, this chapter talks about accepting or declining a job offer. Like my mom and other members of my family say, there's a right way and a wrong way to do anything. There's a right way and a wrong way to accept or decline a job offer. Okay? And so you want to make sure that you move quickly. If you've been given a job offer, you want to accept it within a week of the offer. Okay? If you're going to decline a job offer, you want to make sure that you're tactful, and you want to handle that refusing of a job offer like you would a bad news letter. Okay, so we've written letters already in the class. We've written bad news letters. You don't want to start with the bad news first. And in this case, the bad news would be that you're not taking the job. You want something more general first. You want that abstract first. Then you want to put the bad news in the middle, and then you want to end with some type of a goodwill closing. Okay, and so there's a right and a wrong way to accept and decline a job offer. You want to make sure that you do it the right way. A lot of times companies will send you something in the mail and ask that you sign it, or send you a letter and ask that you sign it to indicate that you have accepted the job offer. Okay, so it just depends on the company and how they tend to do things, but you definitely want to make it official, either in accepting or declining a job offer. Okay, and so we've covered a lot of information in this video. Again, resumes and cover letters will be covered in another video, but hopefully you found this information to be helpful. If you have questions, please contact me and let me know, and I will be happy to answer your questions as best as I can. Have a great day.